Oh, scroll down. Oh, no, sorry, scroll up. Oh, graded. Put in the comment. Not to your, this one, it's to the responsive. Yeah, the responsive one.
All right. How's everyone doing? Saturday? It's a good day, yeah? Yeah, doing okay? Okay, great. Well, today's is going to be a fun class. We're going to do some review activities, and then we're doing pretty much one big project for the rest of class. We're going to be making a calculator in jQuery, and we'll be doing them in groups, so groups of 3 to 4. And we're going to do it this time where the groups will be able to go work wherever, and the TAs and myself, we're all going to rotate between the groups every about 10-15 minutes just so we can help you if you're stuck. If you don't need help, we can tell you good job and walk away. We kind of like keep the groups moving, right? And so we can answer some of those questions you might have, things that you may not remember and need help with. So we're going to try our best to be really engaged during that activity so that, you know, we're not constantly slacking out updates or anything like that. It's just we're going to be there to help you get through the project, right? So it should be a lot of fun. It'll be a nice big review of all of the things that we've done so far. I slacked out a poll or a little survey in the Saturday channel. If you guys could take that really quick. Basically, it's just to get a feel for how you're doing. I know Jason does, you know, gets feedback from all of you, and we've seen some of the feedback, and so we kind of know how people are feeling, but I'd like to get it personally so that we can talk about it, and just so you know that I do care also about hearing feedback directly. I hope that my class at least feels like they can tell me whatever they need to tell me to make me a better instructor. I like to make that a goal so that no one's afraid to say, hey, look, you know, it sucks when you do this. Can we just try to approach the activity a little differently so everyone can learn it better? Yeah, with that, just take that real quick. Just to spend a couple minutes. It's not very long. And we'll talk a little bit more. So I'll show you the responses we're getting back, just so everyone can see it. And this is all anonymous. I'm not tracking anything, so I have no idea who you are when you say that, you know, this sucks and you hate it or whatever, or that you love it and all that. I can't single anyone out. So I just am using this to kind of get a feel for how things are going. This poll is funny because if I'm scrolling and someone enters a response, it scrolls me back to the top, so I can't even read the feedback. It's pretty nice. Yeah, just take a couple more minutes, and then we'll talk a little bit, and then we'll get into class. pretty nice little bell curve we got right there, right? What? Is this live? Yeah, this is updating right now. You'll see the number change. More responses. That's why I can't look at the feedback right now, because people will send in the response, goes boop, pops into the top. So this is awesome. 30 responses. That's good. I appreciate everyone taking the time to do this, and the TAs and I will all talk about this at the end of class after everyone leaves, just to, if there's anything outstanding that we need to look at. From a statistics standpoint, that's kind of a nice little average right there. Yeah, it's pretty good. Most people are feeling okay with JavaScript. I assume everyone was aware that a 5 is like, I'm awesome, and a 1 is like, I don't know. If you didn't know that, sorry. I guess I could have specified. But I'm not exactly a professional survey maker, so that's my bad. Yeah, I should. Yeah, that's a good point. I should, probably. Statistics are pretty important, so, and I don't know them very well. Not anymore. Last time I took stats was probably 8 years ago in college, like freshman year or something, I don't know. Yeah, stats, yeah. Who remembers stats?
But I couldn't do it.
Except for my wife. She's like a super nerd. She's like, oh my gosh, your standard deviations are totally wrong here. And I'm like, how do you know? Why do you care? Like, why are you telling me this? So, I'm going to assume that I know how Monday, Wednesday feels. I'm going to assume Tuesday, Thursday probably feels pretty similar, and that this week was really hard, right? This week was pretty hard. Let's give it a fist of 5. How's everyone feeling about jQuery right now? If I said we're going to do a jQuery exercise, how are we feeling? Yeah, I know you're good. Nick is back, and Jesse, and Adam. Cool. Okay, yeah, so it's all over, and obviously it matches this, so I guess I could have looked at that instead of making you raise your hand and re-answer the question. Yeah, but yeah, this was a really tough week, and we know that. And while the class doesn't necessarily get slower, the good news is next week we have a whole day dedicated to review. Review JavaScript, review jQuery, so we're going to go through all of these exercises. We have a big one today, like I said, a big project we're going to work on today in class. You have your homework that's due tonight. You'll have your jQuery homework due next week. We're going to do some more JavaScript over the course of next week too, and then we have a whole day of review. So even though this has been going really fast, I honestly think everyone's been doing absolutely fantastic. What I saw at the beginning of my Wednesday class versus the end was like night and day. We walked through it together, we worked together, and people really started to click on some things. And then we go back and talk about scopes, and even though I personally did a terrible job explaining that to the class, most people seem to grasp it pretty well. So that was awesome. Like, going back to the raw JavaScript seemed to be a little easier after we played with jQuery for a while, right? So that's the good news. But yeah, this has definitely been tough, and pushing through it has been hard, and we've gotten a lot of feedback that, people have real lives, and staying after class sometimes isn't feasible, getting here super early sometimes isn't feasible, and we know that. So we want to help you as best we can when you are here to help you get through everything. So everyone's been doing a fantastic job. Even those that feel lost really have been doing great. This is one of the better cohorts, probably the best cohort I've seen. Personally, you guys have been going so fast, really getting things, and no one seems to be left in the dust, right? So that's good. It's fantastic, and I'm super impressed and super proud with everyone. Does anyone have anything they'd like to say, or any questions or anything before we move on? I'm going to look at this feedback. It looks like responses have pretty much stopped coming in. So we have our nice little bell curve of how people are feeling with JavaScript and jQuery. Most people are at about a 3. We have a nice, like, almost perfect distribution on each side of people who feel less comfortable and people who feel more comfortable. So the people who are feeling the most comfortable, that's fantastic. And I am super impressed that we have 10 people out of both classes that are feeling that comfortable with JavaScript and jQuery now, because we've really not given you any time to learn these things. We've just kind of been like, here's a bunch of content, wow, and like expect you to know it, right? So the fact that we have most people at 3 here is also fantastic. That means we have a huge distribution of our students are feeling comfortable enough that they could probably do a lot more than they think with JavaScript and jQuery right now. And then we have some students who are feeling a little less comfortable, and the fact that we have so few of those is also awesome. And those students, we want to target you, and we want to get you as much help as we can to catch you up with the rest of the people. If you are here, if you feel like you were here and you weren't part of the 3, 4, 5, that's okay. You shouldn't feel bad. I'm going to guess most of the people that are there are probably they're rating themselves lower than they actually are. There comes a point when you're trying to determine your skills where some people are like, yeah, I'm confident I got this, and some people are like, man, I don't know what's going on, I really don't know what's happening. And the fact of the matter is, you know a lot more than you think, and you just, there's so many things you don't know, and that's what you kind of focus on, right? So I honestly feel that this is probably even lower if I had to rate you all, because it's easy to say I don't know this stuff and it's hard, right? Because it is. So that's kind of how I feel about it. But I appreciate the feedback here, and that's good. That gives us some idea of how we're doing and how we can make it better, and what we can do to kind of support the students who don't feel as comfortable, because those are the people we really want to target the most right now when we get a chance. Some subjects in JavaScript or jQuery they want more help on. Functions, JavaScript, that's a good one. Everything. Listeners, some functions, equality checks, design patterns. Okay, so there's a little bit of everything all across the board. Callbacks, so function-related stuff. Need more time. Yeah, that's good. A lot of what I'm seeing here really seems to be functions seem to still confuse people. And I expect that because functions in JavaScript are extremely powerful, and with that power you have a lot of rules and a lot of ambiguity in things. So that's good to know, though. Nice, I like this. People feeling pretty confident. We have no stragglers here. That's awesome. Even if you're at, at a 3, that is like the perfect place to be, right? Because that means you know enough to be dangerous, and you know enough to get the job done. If you're a 4 or 5, that's fantastic. That's great. It's great to see. Media queries, CSS, media queries, CSS. Okay, looks like a lot of this is related to CSS-based stuff and styling. That doesn't surprise me. Honestly, if I had to go through the boot camp and do the CSS, even with all my experience, I'd probably still have things to say here. I'd be like, hey, I really don't understand how anyone uses CSS or why they choose to do that as a living. It confuses me. So, pace of the class, fast. I expected that. There's a lot of people there feeling totally lost. Yeah, I expected some people to feel that way too. Now, class pace is fast. The unfortunate thing is there's not much we can do to slow the classes down, but what we can do is help you be more engaged as staff, kind of be there and do our best to just engage with you, especially the people that maybe don't like to ask questions out loud or anything. Like, we need to do a better job sometimes, I think, finding you so that we can answer your questions however you feel comfortable, right? Yeah, Andreas?
I know helpful for the class is it's time consuming and obviously staying before and after.
Yeah.
Because if you do 30 minutes before, 30 minutes after,
yeah,
an hour of extra time, you increase your class time by 33%.
Yeah.
Before.
Right. Right. Yeah, staying before, staying after, if you can, is an awesome thing to do. We're obviously glad to help you before and after. Now, one of the things I was just talking to JJ about before class started, you all saw him in here, is that I think myself, and I don't know if the TAs will agree, but we, personally, Monday, Wednesday, maybe we could do more to interrogate you a little bit before class to find out what we can do to help you, because you may not necessarily know what you need help with. So being more active myself, walking around kind of while you're here saying, hey, look, you got to have a question on something. No one here's going to know everything, right? So what can we do to help you? Even if you are a 5 on that scale, there's things you're not going to know and things you're going to want to know about, and we can still help you. So me personally, I'd like to be. I think I need to do a better job being more active before and after class for the people that do show up. So I'm going to make a goal to do that. But yeah, if you can show up, I recommend you do it. And today after class, we'll actually do a little bit of kind of like structured office hours, going over. We're taking a little quiz at the end. We're going to go over that and stuff. So if you want to stay and you have time today, I'd do it. What can we as staff do better to help you? More group activities. Walking through activities. Okay, I'll read through this more in detail while you're doing some activities today. But we're going to do everything we can to make this easier for everyone, right? And I know I've said that a few times already, and I've said that, I try to say that every week, but it's true. Our goal, my goal, is to go through this class and make sure that everyone learns the absolute most they can before they leave, right? We want to get you all as close to getting a job as soon as you walk out of the store as we can, if that's your goal. We want to make you all as close to being experts when you walk out of the store as we can, and we want to make sure everyone feels like that their time and their effort was worth something, right? I really, really want that. Yeah, Andy?
I feel like that's why I rate myself lower, because if I were to go on a technical interview, I would get another time.
You know, Andy, you'd probably be really surprised. I don't think that would necessarily be the case. But the fact that you think that, I mean, it's like a self-reflection thing, right? You're like, hey, I've got some weaknesses, and you know what they are, and that's good. That's going to make it easier for us to help you get further along. And I'm not surprised that there are people that feel that way, right? So, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I'm one of the two.
Well, we'll, you know, and my personal goal is that when you leave this class, you shouldn't feel that way, right?
Okay.
You should, when we're done with this UI stuff, you know, after Project 1 or whatever, you should feel like if you were quizzed on jQuery in an interview, that you could be like, yeah, I know what they're going to ask me, and if I don't know what they're going to ask me, I know how I can figure out how to answer it. The hardest thing to figure out is how to figure it out, right? But once you've figured out how to figure it out, once you get to the interview, you may not even know something, but you can figure it out right there on the spot. And that's more important to a potential employer than how much you know up front. You come in, you're a jQuery, I mean, they might ask me a bunch of stuff about jQuery that I never do. You know, I never use jQuery professionally right now because there's other frameworks. But the thing is, with experience and with time, you can kind of figure out how to solve those problems in the interview and kind of go real quick, right? So that's the most important skill. And if we can get you to that point where you're comfortable with your like, hey, here's something totally new I've never seen before, but I can figure it out because I know how to, then we've succeeded, right? More than just knowing all of the API calls in jQuery. Like, that's less important to me to teach you and to help you learn than how to figure this out, how to understand the low-level stuff about how this stuff works, and, you know, how to, you know, build that intuition. Anyone else want to say anything before we start class? Cool. Well, I appreciate the feedback. We'll look over it. We'll see what we can do, and we're going to do our best to continue making this experience better and better for everyone, right? So we want to hear from you. If you ever have a problem or something you want to say, don't be afraid to say it. That's easier said than done, of course. Or tell Jason. Jason will get it to us, that's for sure, if you don't want to say it to us directly. So feel free to, you know, always give us feedback. We need that feedback to get better. Otherwise, we won't know what to do. So what we're going to do, we're going to transition into class now, is we're going to do a little quiz on scopes. And you can do these as partners, groups of 2. It's going to be activity number 17 for our class. If one of the TAs could slack out, number 17, the scope quiz. Just spend a few minutes looking over the code, kind of talking about it, reading the questions it's asking you, seeing if you can figure out how the examples are going to act differently based off of the scoping rules. And then we'll talk about it. All right, let's talk about this.
Oh, yeah. That one's at 5 That one's at 6 This one has
They are talking about it. Yeah, you're right. All right, guys, let's go over this one together as a class. So scoping is pretty confusing, especially at first. Trying to understand how scopes can change, how variables can change in different scopes. Hey, Jesse, we're gonna go over it as a class. We'll let them finish explaining it since it's mostly through the solution. But anyway, we're gonna continue on. So the first situation behaves a little differently than the second situation. Okay. So is there anyone in here who wants to walk through that first situation? Jesse, I already know you know how to walk through it. Anyone want to share? No? No? No one wants to share? Michael, you want to share? Still figuring it out? Okay. Jesse, walk us through it.
So what happens is that when you call function A1, it gets in there and it actually resets with my var, that variable there, it actually resets the global variable. So since the global variable is defined at the top, my var equals 1. But when we get into the function, we're actually resetting the global variable to 5 minus 3. So that's why the call to V1, function V1 actually prints out 5 minus 3, which is 2. And then the second alert basically prints out the same variable.
Prints out 2, right?
The same thing. So it's going to print out the same. It should print out the same thing on both those alerts.
Okay.
Because it's actually, it's not redefining the variable. It's actually resetting its value.
Exactly. Yep. So when we run this, after we've talked about this, you'll see that it's going to print Q1B2, Q1A, 2. Because, as Jesse said, we're literally just reassigning myvar1, that global myvar1 that exists in the global scope, to 2. We're just reassigning it, okay? We're not doing anything to redeclare it or anything like that. And you can easily see this if you could do all kinds of things. You could change myvar1 equal to hello world or something. If you want a more clear example of how this is going to change. Reassignment. So, situation 2, slightly different. There's one key difference, and that is myvar2 right here has the var in front of it in the a2 function, as opposed to the other scenario, myvar1, which does not. Well, now, when you put that var in front of it, you are completely redefining the variable inside of a different scope. Okay? So in this scenario, we have myvar2 equals 1. We're entering the a2 function. In the a2 function, we're redefining myvar2 equal to 2. Then we call the b2 function, and in the b2 function, we're still reading the global version of myvar2. The scope here is still based off of the global version because the read declaration of a2 in a2 is not read in b2. So we should get q2b1, and then in here, q2a will actually equal 2. So if I pull this open and I refresh it, so we said we're going to get q1b is 2, q2 or q1a is 2, q2b is 1, and q2a is 2. So q1b is 2, yep, q1a is 2, q2b is 1, and q2a is 2. So if we look again at those examples right next to each other, refresh it, q1b right here is going to be 2 because we reassign my var1 to 2. We hit OK. q1a is still going to be 2 because that reassignment right here holds. We go on down and we have b2 is being run, so we call b1. We're redefining myvar2 and a2 to 2. b2 is called. It does not know about that redefinition at all. So it's going to call the global version, which is 1. Click through again. A is going to be 2 because it's using the redefinition. Any questions? Cool. So the next thing we're going to jump to really quick is number 18, this example. Go ahead and do it in partners. This one is going to be using that this keyword that we talked about briefly this week. So try to use the comments and everything there to kind of guide what's going on and figure out how it all works. Run the code. See if you can understand what's going on. But then here we read the final movement.
You ignored that one.
Oh, that's true. It's like a 9 to 5, so it just doesn't know what to do because it's not inside itself. It does its thing. So when it refers to this, it's like no. Go back to the first two sentences. So basically, I don't like the bar. I override the function and the same All right, let's go over this example. Haha, get it? That was funny. I said this. Yeah, anyway. No one laughed. That's okay. This example, literally called this example, God, they could pick a better name for it, is really tough. This keyword in JavaScript is known for being one of the most ambiguous and confusing things literally in all of JavaScript. So much so that they brought in new coding constructs to avoid it altogether. So just like with var, we have new constructs like let and const that avoid var altogether because it also sucks. They invented something to get rid of this. So if you had a hard time with this example, I don't blame you because it literally makes no sense. So that's okay. Let's talk about it. This first one. What is this one going to print, Rolando? It's going to print the window. Yes. And do you know the reason why?
Because when you call this on your window, it's everything inside of it.
Yes. So remember a raw script. Yes. So when you're in a raw script like this, your scope is the window. Effectively, it's everything. The window is like the one true god of JavaScript, I guess. And when you don't have a scope assigned, or you don't have an object in that scope, then you get the window. Okay? And so when you console log this in the global scope, which is something outside of a block or a function, you get the window. Now, this part's a little confusing. We're inside of a function. What is this going to print here? Jesse?
Window.
The window, why?
Because there's no object or actual scope really of that particular function. So it's the scope of that function is this. This is the window.
Exactly. There's no object or anything to redefine this. So again, or this is just a window because that is who our parent is. The global scope is still the window. So this will print the window. And we'll run through this after we've talked about all the examples. Now example 3 starts to get a little different. Someone from Tuesday, Thursday. What's this going to print here? Red Hat? It is. Why? Because that's, yeah. There's a reason why, and there's a reason why you can determine this. So we're in this object, which we haven't talked a lot about yet. But you see you got the curly braces defined, and then you have like some properties, right? So you have this name, and then a colon, and then a value, right? So it's almost like a variables, except for instead of the equal sign, we have a colon. It's just why they just decided to do it that way in objects. So Red Hat is the name property. This function is also assigned to the object because we have that colon, right? That's an explicit assignment on an object. And when you do that with a function, it changes who this is. If it's attached to an object, it says, well, now this is the object, okay? So we have a name property on some object. So this, in this case, is some object. So when you print this, you get Red Hat. Again, it's a new concept, and in the next exercise, we're going to talk about objects some more, so we get a little bit more familiar with them. But just remember that this is almost like assigning a variable that's attached to the object when you have that colon as opposed to the equal sign. Now, you can't use the colon outside of an object. That's an aside, but it's a special syntax for objects. So now we get to a more confusing example. Now we have an object, okay? We have a name that's set to nothing. And so the name is assigned to the object because it has that colon there, right? And it's inside the object's curly braces. Then we have a function also assigned to the object, okay? So we know that this, inside of this function, if we go off the consistency of this example, right here, we know that this is probably going to be the object, my object, right? So when I set the name equal to star power up, I'm probably going to be able to see that if I console log this, I'll see a name of star power up. However, we have this function in here. And we're setting it equal to a variable. Var change name equals some function, right? And what it does is takes in a name and sets this dot name equal to something else. We call change name blue shell, and then we console log this. And much to our surprise, the name is still what? Star power up. It has not changed. And that's an interesting feature of JavaScript, and this is where this becomes very confusing. So I have all these rules, these consistent rules. Okay, well, I'm using the colon, I'm assigning this function to the object, so this is changed to the object. But this function is no different than my function up here. The reason why, there's no colon. I don't see any colon. It's not directly inside the curly braces of the object. It's not assigned to the object. It's assigned to a variable. And when you assign a function to a variable, this is the window. So if we console log this before and after the name change, you'll see that the object is the window that it's changing, and we're giving the window a name, which isn't what we wanted to do. But now you can see that this is super confusing and kind of does its own thing, right? So we never really changed the name of, quote-unquote, this object, right? My object. That's an exciting one. And then an even trickier, crazy version. We again have my object. We have the name. It's assigned to the object, right? Because we have that colon and we have the name inside the curly braces. We have this yell function also assigned to the object. So we know that the this binding inside of this function is my object. But then we're doing something real funky. We're assigning this to a variable. And in this case, at this exact moment, this is my object, right? So we're going to change this name to star power up, just like the last example. So my object's name is now star power up. However, in our change name function, which is assigned to a variable, not assigned to the object, so we know that this binding inside this function was going to be the window, right? But instead of this binding, we're using that variable we assigned earlier, which is literally assigned to the this of the previous function. Now if I call change name with blue shell and I console log this or this object, I'm going to see that my object's name has changed to what it should be, which is blue shell. This is the workaround to the last example. Because this bindings are so weird and they do whatever they want, we have to hack and literally assign this to a variable, which you can do, which is super weird, and use that variable instead. Remember the scoping rules? So this object exists in this parent scope, and this function is defined inside the parent scope. So just like my var1 in the last example, we can get to this variable, which is this, the appropriate this, and change the name. So if I go ahead and open this bad boy up, all right. So the first one prints the window. Boop. The second one prints the window, right? We discussed that. This one's going to print Red Hat. This crazy thing is going to print the star power right here. So it's still got star power, right? Star power up instead of the blue shell. And if we were to change this, printing this and change so that we can see what this is in here. You'll see that after this prints, it'll print right before this. It's going to be something completely different. Now we go to the last example, and the name is appropriately changed to blue shell. So let's go ahead and copy this because I want to see both examples print out so you can see them. Version 2. I want to print this object, and I want this to be this. See how this changes. Okay, so the first three going to stay the same. Printing and change name, you'll see, the window, and I can literally scroll on down and find the name right here has been set to blue shell. Now that's in this function, right? So like I said, because this function is assigned to a variable and not directly given to the object, it's this byting is the window. So when we change this.name, we literally changed the name of the window, which is not helpful to anyone for any reason. So you don't want to do that. It's kind of a pain. And when we print out our object, we get our star power up again. Now this time, in this second example, we're using this object, changing the name. If I print this object, I get the exact same thing as if later I print this. Because I'm circumventing the functions version of this with this variable that we set on the parent functions version of this, which again is directly assigned to the object, so this is the object. That is super confusing, I know. But does it clear up anything for anyone? Are there any questions on the weird things that are happening with this in these examples? It's pretty trippy. Yeah, Adam? There's not an easier example. That's about as easy as it gets. Yeah, there's no easier example to explaining this. It just kind of is. Yeah, Jesse?
One thing for me, if you go up to the function above this, one thing that might help here is in this situation, well actually you can do it in the second one. If you change this to my object, you'll get the exact same thing.
Like right here?
Right there, or yeah, all of them. If you change all of them to, all of this is in this function to my object, you'll get the exact same thing out. So that tells you what the context is. Now if you go down to the bottom, the lower one, the only place, if you change this to my object, you'll see that what you're doing, this is my object, you'll get the same output.
Yep.
Basically,
not that.
This has a content, this is pointing to the object itself. Okay, so that's what this means. This is the object that in this context. Now, in the upper versions, you change this to window, and you get the same thing.
Yep. Yeah, that's
right there. You change that. Basically, this guy. I mean, so there it's window, so you get the same thing. Now that one also is the same, but this one here, it's same logic.
Yep. It's a good way to view it is you replace this everywhere with the object that it's supposed to be, and you'll see the same results. Now in this one, remember we changed this here to my object. This is again taking advantage of variables and scoping, right? So the scope of my object is right here. We can use it inside functions that it defines even because they share the same scope, right?
And actually, what we did here will actually change the output because we actually said console log my object.
Yes, this one will change the object to be equivalent to this one.
To be there like the bottom.
It won't fail anymore and rename the window. Thank you for that, Jesse. Okay, so we're going to do another example of dealing with objects so you get a little bit more familiar with them. This is example number 19 called cobwebs. Spend about 10 minutes doing this one or so. And we'll talk about that. Hopefully you'll understand objects better, and then we'll talk about our cool project we get to do.
Carson, on this example, you need to go and grab the reference for Bootstrap and the JavaScript from Bootstrap, because the references they have in the code.
For this one that we're working on right now?
Yeah, the actual, it's the integrity string is wrong. And so you got to replace your Bootstrap link and your JavaScript and your jQuery link with correct one, because the integrity string is wrong.
Okay. Cool. So if you want to get the Bootstrap and the jQuery, well, you want the jQuery, but you actually don't need either of them. If you want them, you need to replace those. If you don't care and you just want to work with the code, then you can, because you're only going to need console logs. Thank you, Jesse.
Yeah, what's the other thing? You don't have to do this. Yeah, mine didn't. Maybe I just didn't bug. Two errors. I got the errors too. I just did alert. Oh. Yeah. And that's why so you do the console log, and then all of that stuff goes inside the console log.
Yeah, that's fine. Come on
Sorry.
through. No problem.
We're missing the bigger thing. Because we have to go outlet. So you have to go in order though, right? So
Yes.
what about
So just follow the order of the objects that are in the order. That's what Jesse was talking about. They're
All right, let's talk about this example now. So, yeah, sorry everyone who didn't finish. I know this one was tough. This one was primarily extra tough because we have spent almost no time actually talking about objects in class yet. And we'll spend a lot more time in the coming weeks getting more used to them, and they're a very important construct in JavaScript. They're extremely powerful. So, how do you get to a subproperty of an object? Well, there's actually a neat little trick that we haven't really discussed. But if you remember some of the other examples, we would have something like var myObj, right? And it would have like a name property, which would be Carson or something. And it might have a function that we call yell or something, right? And when we wanted to call the function yell, if you looked at the last example, we could do something like yell. That's how you access a property of an object. So to that extent, just like we did with this, if we wanted to get to the name, you could do that. So that begs the question of, if the parent object, we can access its properties by using a dot. If the property of an object is an object, can't we access its properties with a dot? And the answer is yes, absolutely. So, I found my glasses. Glasses are in the bigger web items list, right? So we want to console.log the cobweb. The cobweb is an object, so we need to get to its property. It looks like it's in bigger web's items, right? So we need to get to bigger web. Biggest web. And then inside of biggest web, there's bigger web. Biggest web's an object, so we can do bigger web. Inside of that, we have items, and item 0 in the array, remember arrays, happens to be glasses. toothbrush. Console.log the cobweb dot biggest web dot bigger web dot smaller web dot item, right? Because we're going all the way through the hierarchy of objects. I want my headphones. This one is going to be, you have a volunteer. Yeah?
Should be the cobweb.
The cobweb
Dot biggest web.
dot biggest web
Other big web.
dot other big web dot item. Exactly. And the last one, homework. That's a long one. How are we going to get that out? Peyton, how do we do that?
That'll be the cobweb dot biggest web
Okay?
dot bigger web dot smaller web dot tiny web dot items 3.
Let's verify. Glasses, toothbrush, headphones, and homework. Now, I didn't say I found mine, but whatever. So, the point is, you have an object. To access its properties, which are all the things that are inside the curly braces and have a name, colon, some value, you use a dot. So, the cobweb dot biggest web gives us the biggest web. Now, biggest web is an object, as its curly braces, and inside it has properties that are assigned with a name, colon, and a value. So to get to an object's properties, you use a dot. So biggest web dot something. We need to get through the bigger web. Okay? We have the cobweb dot biggest web dot bigger web. Well, bigger web's an object. Okay? So to get to its items, for instance, you do dot items. Now, items are not an object. They're an array. So if you try to do dot glasses, it's going to fail miserably. So that's when we have to change our strategy and use the value there as it is intended. If it was a Boolean, it'd be a Boolean value. If it was a number, we'd be able to do number things with it. So on and so forth. Any questions on how the basics of these objects? Yeah?
Don't we have to get it to say I found mine?
Right. So how would I change this then?
Parentheses, and then you type it out and you have a plus with it.
Parentheses?
Sorry, the quotation mark.
Quotes? And then we can add a plus, right? And then if I go ahead and load this up, boom, I found my glasses. Yep. So technically, you wanted to print that out too, if you want the full example. But the hardest part here was definitely accessing the properties of the object. So there's a bonus. That's actually a pretty tough one. This is the kind of question that you'd maybe get in a technical interview someday. It is hard, right? But you might see questions like this. It's a tricky one. Do you have a question? Your code's not working? We'll check it out in just a moment. What is it giving an error or something in the console, or?
It's just the ones that don't have an array.
The ones that don't have an array, like what? Do you want to Slack me one of the lines of code that isn't working? And we can look at it? You want to check it out? Alright. Any other questions on these objects then? And how you access things in the object? Don't worry about setting stuff yet, like adding to an object or anything. Just know that you can access its properties by using the dot. The dot accessor is what it's called. Okay. So, we're now going to talk about our fun big project that is going to take effectively the rest of the class. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you what we got. We have a calculator. You get to use jQuery for this, not raw JavaScript. works like you would expect the calculator to work. 5 minus 8 equals negative 3. 8 times 9 equals 72. Right? 2 to the second power equals 4. Okay? So, the gist of what we got. We've got our traditional calculator layout that has the 10 digits, 0 through 9. You have your plus, minus, multiply, divide, and power signs. And then you have an equal, so you can calculate some math. And then you have a clear button to start over. Now, some of the rules here. You only have to support one operation, so 2 plus 5 is all you got to do. You don't got to be able to add, you don't got to be able to like 2 plus 5 plus 7 plus 8. Obviously, when I'm clicking here, it's changing the operation. You don't necessarily need to do that, but you could. That's one way to handle this scenario. Or, if I click on an operation after you've already started, you could be forced to hit clear. I mean, you can kind of decide how this is going to work for the user. The important thing is you've got to have all of these buttons, and they've got to work as I would expect as a user. Okay, so if I do 1 plus 2, I better get 3 out. You want to display the results on the right-hand side. There's going to be certain scenarios. 8 divided by 0, you probably shouldn't do that. So maybe you could handle it better than writing infinity, because that's clearly not the result. Right? So think about problems like that too when you're solving this. So what we're going to do, are there any questions on this and how this works? This is all with jQuery. Use Bootstrap. Make sure you have all of those things. What we're going to do is get into groups of 3 or 4. 2 people from each class if you do 4. Okay? Try to get people of other classes in there. So if you do 3, 2 people from one class, 1 from another. Try not to go less than 3. It's going to be really hard to do this on your own and with a small group because this is a pretty expansive project. We've got like an hour or like an hour 30 minutes almost to work on this thing. So it's no small feat. Okay, so you can choose the groups yourselves. And the way we're going to do this, after we do the first like pseudocoding phase, we're going to split up. You'll be able to just go work wherever on the second floor as long as you're not disturbing the other class or anything. And myself and the TAs are going to rotate through the groups to help you like get unstuck, answer questions, so on and so forth, right? So form your groups, okay? 3 to 4 people. And then we're going to talk about our pseudocoding section we're going to do first to kind of set up everything. All right, so go ahead and do that. Get into your groups, shift around if you need to, and then we'll talk about starting. Three to four. 3 to 4 in your groups. Try not to do more than that. Try not to do less. Does everyone have a group? Who does not have a group? You don't have a group? Who has a group of... You don't have a group? You want to join their group? That's fine. That's fine. If, yeah, I'd rather you be in groups than not. So, everyone got a group then? Okay. So, here's the deal. Will slacked out the HTML you're going to need and the instructions for starting the actual programming of this calculator, okay? So what we're going to do first is focus a little bit on pseudocoding. And I'll slack out some stuff you should be aware of, but I want you to spend about 20 minutes until 11:30, okay, working on your pseudocoded solution. So think about questions like, look at this final result. If I click a button, what do I got to do? You know, what information do I have? I have to know what number is associated with the button. I have to have a click handler. I have to be able to keep track of what number was entered. Was it the first number or the second number? Was the operator entered? Okay. If I click an operator, what's got to happen? How do I know what math function to run when I click a specific operator? You know, how do I lay out the calculator, right? Because there's still a lot of HTML and CSS work to do. There's a layout. So how do I lay this out? What kind of components do I need in Bootstrap to be able to lay it out nicely so it's easy to get to? How do I make the buttons this size? How do I lay them out nice? Stuff like that. Try to keep track of and plan out all these little things to the best of your ability. Obviously, you don't got to go into a ton of detail. Yeah?
The buttons and result area or the
Oh, the buttons in the result area are given to them? Never mind, okay. Yeah, it's like the fridge. So go ahead and look at the HTML then that you're given. Open the HTML and think about the individual pieces of logic you're going to have to write to solve this problem, okay? So now 20 minutes, write it out, draw it out. I don't really care. At least talk it out as a group and come up with a plan and know who's going to do what and how you're going to work together and all that stuff, okay? So at 11:30, I'm gonna interrupt you and we're going to talk a bit about how we're going to work on this project and we're going to go from there.
Not for pseudocoding, you just kind of want to maybe identify your components that would be true first. But let's, like, where do we want to start with this, right? How do we need to figure out how to do it? So, we need to be able to have like ongoing to get the value of the variables and how that value comes from the capture the probably render the input. Like we just like go over like what this looks like from here. So what else do you guys see? What else do you guys think? So we have, from a user standpoint, we're capturing their input, we're rendering their input. Results display. In this version,
I guess we have to actually calculate that. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So we get first input, then calculate.
Yeah. So we already have about everything in the layout. Total value out of the HTML. That's an optimization question, but either way works. So it's however you decide to create it. So we need 3 inputs before we do anything. What's your
Is that so? That's all one bid.
yeah, so it's like a results container, right? And then we have yeah, so one plus yeah, each one for the first numbers, operation, second number, and then results. So you
So it is 4 days.
granted, they're each one tax. So
Yeah, they're all.
yeah. So yeah, we also have to keep track. How do we know which entry goes where? Like, depending on how it's, I don't know if like if it's like a state where to see if so like there's multiple results now. The only one that's wrong is if it just moves the result to one. No matter which way you take. So like how are you going
So real quick, guys, I just want to show you something. This is also a valid input set, so you can have multiple digit numbers for both inputs. So keep that in mind. Don't assume you're just adding a single digit plus another single digit. So that makes a difference in how you're going to code this. Sorry, keep going.
Right, yeah. So the fits eventually right track. So you decide on how you guys want your inputs. Your idea is going to work with that. Your idea is going to work with what else do you guys think? So do you want to go with this idea? You guys have another idea on how to pick those inputs?
Yeah, that works. I'm like thinking like, what is the first time?
At least the way I see it.
Yeah, if we're doing it.
I just really play with that. That's pretty hard. Can you clear that and just do like, just press a bunch of numbers?
Like, are you looking for the limit?
No, I just want to see. I want to see how it works. So like, when does it let us enter the next number? Right. So
Not until you hit the operation. Yeah, so think of it as you're reading the first number, then operation comes in, and then you're done with that number. Put that away, and you start reading the next number. Say that again.
Yeah, just okay, so yeah. Second number.
No, I mean, I was kind of so like, I don't know, they're all valid.
just clarify on your Snipster, right? You don't ever use that?
Yeah, there's already a group that went in that room over there, and so I kind of like went in there and gave them a little personalized.
Oh, good, good,
You know,
good,
'cause
good.
they're away from the pack, and when you're away from the pack, I think you tend to lose.
Yeah, well, they're losing the benefit of everything that's going on.
If we're ready to go, we can help, or do we have to stay?
I would stick around and just until Carson comes back in, because he may have more he needs to give you.
I was thinking that we would.
If he's not back in a few minutes, we'll be like, no, you can get going, which is fine, but I thought he was coming back in to like talk about the exercise. So he's not there.
When you know when you're pending, you have to obviously
There's a battle in there, so I was trying to do it.
okay, think of the condition when you stop a pending. So now you know not to hold it first. You have an option. How many operators? Right. So then what happens when you choose after that? How when you know not to offend it? Two. And that's how you solve
Right.
So that is your race structure or the race structure. So the concept you solve that's how you So now that we got their inputs, we got to minus all of this. Now how do we know what to do? What do we do from that? Okay, so yeah, so you hit enter. Now what do you get to do? Yeah, so after we hit equals, now what happens?
Probably do some sort of, I don't even think it would be maybe a call number.
Sorry, you both were speaking at the same time, so I missed both. Can you say that again?
It's 5.
The source variable, reference supply. I don't know if that makes sense.
So basically what I'm saying is
Alright, so how do you guys want to solve? So we know what the operator is by that second variable. So now what do we do with that? You know what it is. Now what do we do? Okay. Now, the variable, I'll tell you an issue we're going to have there is the variable 2, which is our operator, is going to be a string. It's going to be a string. So how are you going to execute what's that operation? String itself. Escaping that's going to be like now you can look up in JavaScript to see if they have anything that can say execute this function. I think it was. Some languages have that type of thing. Let's not go down that route. So let's find a different route that's a little more logical.
I got it.
Because I know there's some functions that they convert straight to
Right, no, we're definitely going to have to use that because each one of these is going to be a string object. Like I said, we don't want to do mixed arrays. We don't want to have a string in the middle of an integer array. That's just bad practice. We should not have to do that. So they're all going to be strings. Now you're exactly right when you have this number. You have to convert them, or those strings you have to convert them. And that really is that. Yes. So we put it up. No, like I said, something like that might exist, but that's yeah, you could try using string operator. I'm not sure if that exists, but if it does, something you try. Correct. So that's what I'm kind of like looking into.
All right, if you guys want to go to your breakout sessions and work on your stuff, you can now if you want to, or you can stay in here. It's up to you. Oh, of course. I tell them to come back.
Are we gonna code this? Are we just gonna like somebody's writing it out?
Yeah, one person writes it out, and everyone just kind of like gets together.
That's okay. If you are streaming, I am going to kill the stream and kill the recording until 12:40. At 12:40, I'll just slack out a new objective, just basically to go over the remainder of the logic and all that. But no, the stream and all that will be down, so ping the TAs or myself on Slack if you need any help.